بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to our second class of the philosophy of ethics, Al-Akhlaq. It's the second class of this year, but it's the 17th course and session of this entire class. Last week, we started speaking about a new vice, and that was greed, al-hirs. And we defined greed as being the desire to possess. When you have that excessive desire to possess, you want, this is called greed. And the opposing virtue was contentment, when you're satisfied with what you have. You don't have greed and a desire to own more and more and have more and more. We spoke about greed, the harms of greed, the benefits of contentment last week. And we also spoke about the diagnosis stage. Remember, we said there's always a few steps in order to get rid of any vice and to replace it with a virtue. We spoke about the diagnosis. How do I know if I am a greedy person or not? We mentioned 3 ways for that. Today, inshallah, we will begin by speaking about the cause. What is the cause of greed in us? And remember, we said the cause, identifying the cause helps us in the last stage, which is the treatment stage. When you know the cause, you know how you can fix the issue. So what is the cause of greed? The cause of greed, my friends, is one of 2 factors. The first cause of greed is the fact that to many of us, the dunya is sweet. The dunya is sweet. We enjoy the dunya. And that's why we want to have more of it. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam mentions this point in Nahj al-Balagha. The Imam says, أَمَّا بَعْدْ فإني أحذركم الدنيا فإنها حلوة خضرة حفت بالشهوات. The Imam says that beware of the dunya. The Imam is telling us to be cautious of the dunya. Why? Because the Imam says إنها حلوة خضرة, because the dunya has a sweet side to it, the pleasureful, delightful side to it. حفت بالشهوات. When you want the dunya, you want it through the desires, and the desires many times are very, very pleasureful, very sweet. So when we look at the materialistic part of the dunya, the reason why we're attracted to it is because it looks very exciting to us. Money really can make life exciting. You know, having a mansion, having a supercar, having a yacht, and going on vacations on business class or private jets and staying in a 5-star resort. All of the glamour of living a rich life, it attracts us human beings. It's sweet. We enjoy the materialistic aspects of the dunya. And that's why you find many of us fall in love with the dunya. We fall in love with the dunya because that sweetness that we taste, we can never let go of it. It tastes so sweet. And this is when we see that we are seduced. We're lured by that sweetness. It's so strong until we become slaves. Yes, some of us, my friends, become slaves of the dunya, as Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says. He mentions in Nahj al-Balagha, وَوَلِهَتْ عَلَيْهَا نَفْسُهُ فَهُوَ عَبْدٌ لَهَا وَلِمَنْ فِي يَدَيْهِ شَيْءٌ مِّنْهَا. He says the human being, وَلِهَتْ عَلَيْهَا نَفْسُهُ. His nafs is in love with the dunya, such that he becomes a abd, a slave of anyone that has the dunya. If someone can give me a part of the dunya, I will become a slave to that person because I'm intoxicated by the love of the dunya. حيثما زالت زال إليها وحيثما أقبلت أقبلت. Wherever the dunya goes, I follow. because I'm just too attached to the dunya, because I want those desires, I want that sweetness, I want the pleasures and the delights of the dunya. I want to enjoy it. So why do we have greed for the dunya? Is because the nature of dunya sometimes is sweet, and we are attracted to that sweetness of the dunya. We like the beauty of having money and the desires and enjoying life. So this is the first cause of greed. Why do we want the dunya? Because when we have it, we enjoy it. The second cause for the greed that we have towards the dunya is that we think many of the times, we think that dunya makes us happy. Money makes us happy. So why do we want dunya? When I see someone has more than me, why do I have greed, meaning I want it too? Because I feel like he has more than me, he's happier than me. So number one, we enjoy the dunya, we want it. Number two, we think it makes us happier. And this is what we have to understand, brothers and sisters, is that a certain level of dunya is necessary. Yes, money, materialism does make us happy. We can't just come out and deny it. No, because it's true. A certain amount of money makes you happy. I mean, if you don't have a house, you can't eat food, you're not going to be happy. And once you have money enough to live a decent life, you're going to be happy. But where we go wrong is when we think that the more money we have, the happier we will get. Let's say I make $50,000 a month. To me, making 100,000 a month means I'll be twice happier. Making 200 means I'll be 4 times happier. We think it's a pattern, it's an analogy. It's not. This is where we go wrong. Why? I'll speak about that in the treatment stage. So the point is, why are we attracted to the dunya? Why do we have greed? It's because the dunya is sweet and because we think dunya makes us happy. So now that we understand that, let's go to the next stage, the treatment stage. How do we treat the greed within? Number one, we have to learn how to be content. Remember, we said the opposing virtue is contentment. We have to learn how to be satisfied with what we have. How do we do that? Al-Imam al-Sadiq mentions in the hadith. The Imam says, أنظر إلى من هو دونك في المقدرة ولا تنظر إلى من هو فوقك في المقدرة فإن ذلك أقنع لك بما قسم لك. The Imam gives us a 2-step strategy so that we can develop contentment. You want to be content? I want to be happy with whatever I have. I don't want to be greedy for more. How do you do that? The Imam says, do 2 things. Number one, the Imam says, do not look at those that have more than you. Some of us, we have this tendency that we just look at what other people have. We develop greed for more when we see what we don't have, things that we don't need. We see it, we want it. You see, this is the problem with the nafs. Once it sees something, it wants it. And if you just go out about and just looking at other people's lives and seeing what they have, you're going to feel discontent. Why don't I have it? I want it. So the Imam says, how do you put an end to that? Just don't look. Don't go and looking what people have that you don't, because your nafs is going to want it. Just deny your nafs from even looking at it, because once it looks, that's it. You're stuck. And today it's very difficult to do that because we're constantly being bombarded by what? By ads. These ads are trying to tempt you to buy things. You don't need it. Probably you don't even want it, but once you see that nice ad, oh, I want it now, because your nafs, if it sees something, it wants it. So you have to try to block it. Use the ad blocker. Don't go on don't watch too much TV. I don't know, whatever helps you in not seeing, because they say seeing is believing. With the nafs, seeing is wanting. Unless you teach your nafs, like Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, where he says, إِنَّمَا هِيَ نَفْسِي أَرُوضُهَا بِالتَّقْوَى. He says, with taqwa, I have trained my nafs to be content, such that when I see good food, I see money, I see a nice house, my nafs has been tamed and disciplined such that it doesn't tell me, keeps on pushing me. I want it, I want it. So people, they don't feel like going down that road, but they can't control their nafs. Their greed is too powerful. It leads them to following a path that they didn't even want to begin with. So don't look at the lives of people that have more than you. Sometimes, we look at the lives of the successful, of the wealthy, people that are smarter than me, better looking than me, whatever it may be. When you look, you're going to be discontent with what you have and you'll be greedy. You're going to want more and more and more. And one way that we've been recently been doing that is through social media. Before, if you wanted to see the lives of successful, you'd have to go and visit them in person. Now you can do it through social media, through the internet. Their lives are all displayed on Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. And they always portray the beautiful parts of their lives. How many pictures you see someone in his, Porsche, in his Ferrari, in his private jet, he's in a 5-star hotel, he's in this tropical, beautiful island, right? He wants to show that he has a nice life. When you're just scrolling and looking, you're like, oh man, I'm sitting here in this boring Hujjah class while my friend or cousin is in Hawaii. Now, probably now with the COVID, not too many vacations, but before this, once you scroll and see other people's what they have, you start to be discontent with what you have. And the solution, like I said, don't look. Just focus on your life. Don't care about what other people are making and having and doing, even if it's your brother, your cousin, your neighbor. The more you look, the more you're going to find. There's some people, they have a habit of following the new trends, the new styles, the new gadgets. Anything that comes out new, they look, they see, they want, they go and buy it. Cut that out. You don't need to do that. You're just feeding the greed remember, greed of the nafs, it can grow. The more you show it, the more you give it, the greater it will become. It won't shrink. It's not like when you're hungry, you eat, you're satisfied. No, when you feed the nafs's greed, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So why put yourself in a situation where you yourself are following the news? Put an end to this habit of just following. What's the new phone? What's the new laptop? What's the new clothing trend? What's the new blah, blah, this, that. Don't know anything about that. When you don't know, you can't want it, right? If I don't know something exists, how am I going to want it? So the more you block your nafs from being exposed to what's out there, the less it's going to want. So this is the first thing that Imam al-Sadiq says. لا تنظر إلى من هو فوقك. Do not look at those that have more than you. Because once you look, you're going to want it, you're going to be discontent. And then the Imam, the second part of his strategy was, وانظر إلى من هو دونك. Why don't you look at those that have less than you? Yes, maybe you're making only 40,000 a year and it's not a lot. Your cousin is making 100. But look at those that are making 20, 10. Look at the poor individuals in the... Make it a habit to look at those that have less. You'll see how blessed you are in this. Whatever problem you have, there's people that have it worse. Now, if you teach yourself this, to not look at those that have more and look at those that have less, you will start developing qana'ah, which is contentment. The greed will slowly go away. Why am I greedy when I see I am, alhamdulillah, much better than so many other people? I'm satisfied with what I have because other people have much less than me. Maybe, for example, I don't have too much money, right? But alhamdulillah, I don't have any sicknesses. I don't have any psychological problems. I don't have any family issues. If I had one of those issues, I can always find things that I don't have that multimillionaire has, right? He has also other issues. So look at those that have less than you. And this will help you in becoming content. Number two, how do you treat the greed within? Know the nature of this dunya. Remember, we said the first cause of greed is because we think the dunya is beautiful. We think the dunya is so sweet. If you have money, you'll live like a king, right? Wrong. It's all a mirage. Understand that this dunya is not a place to be comfortable. This dunya, if you rely on it, if you trust it, it will destroy you. It will backstab you. It will, unfortunately, it will destroy you. So we have to understand and remind ourselves of the darker side of this world. Because once you tell yourself this dunya is such a waste, It's not worth it. There's so many problems with it. You're not going to want it. Versus someone that says, no, this dunya is so beautiful. You can enjoy it. No, 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 no. Even if you have all the money. Can you get rid of sicknesses? You can't. Just realize how weak you are in this dunya. You're going to know that this dunya is not worth running after. And that's why Imam Ali alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha, he compares this dunya to a snake. How? He says a snake has an outer exterior. It's soft, it's nice, sometimes it's colorful, right? It's fun just to touch the snake. But at the same time, what's beneath that outer layer? Poison. So he says, if you're a wise individual, are you going to go play with a snake because the outer exterior is nice? No, because it'll bite you. He says, this is exactly how this dunya is. Yes, there is some sweetness to the dunya. We can't deny that. The desires, they make us happy. But this is only a thin coating. The dunya is sugar coated with these desires. Once you get used to the dunya, it'll bite you one day. It'll betray you. It'll just all of a sudden you wake up one day. May God forbid the doctor says you have cancer. Where did that come from? This was the dunya that you loved so much. Allah told you that there's going to be trials, there's going to be poverty. All of a sudden there's a pandemic and it comes and it wipes out 20 years of your hard work in your business. Nobody said this life is perfect. Why are you surprised? Allah told us in the Holy Quran, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, I will try you through so many hardships. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam says in Nahj al-Balagha, تحلت بالآمال وتزينت بالغرور لا تدوم حبرتها ولا تؤمن فجعتها غرارة ضرار. What beautiful words the Imam uses against the dunya. He says, تحلت بالآمال وتزينت بالغرور. The dunya is deceitful. Why? Because you think you're going to enjoy it. You're going to live 80, 90 years, a beautiful life. I just got a good job. I just got married, right? You plan 70 years ahead. All of a sudden, there is this sickness that you never planned. There's this car accident that you never planned. There's this pandemic. There's this psychological issue. There's this legal problem. There's unlimited amount of problems. You never planned. The dunya doesn't tell you. The dunya lures you with its glamour and its wealth and its materialism, right? And that's why he says, لا تدوم حبرتها. The habra means the happiness of the dunya does not last for too long. ولا تؤمن فجعتها. You can never be sure that there won't be a tragedy in your life. غرارة ضرارة. It is deceitful, the dunya. It lures you and then destroys you. It can bite any second. So the Imam says, this is the real dunya. Don't just look at the beautiful side of the dunya. There's a dark side to the dunya that you can never guarantee yourself it will not attack you, that you will not be in the middle of that dark side. You want to see the dark side, the true side of the dunya? Don't go to Hawaii and the resorts. No, this is all fake. This is a thin. Go to the hospitals. Go to the kids section. You'll see how many innocent kids. One has leukemia, the other has a different kind of cancer, a third one has, all these weird, rare types of diseases. Innocent kids, that could be my kid and your kid. Go to the other wards of the hospital. This is the dunya here. This is what you want, the Imam says. Go to the graveyard. Read the ages. Some of us, we've never done that, but do it. I did it one day in Iran. I went to just read the ages of the kids. Go to the kids section. 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old. This is the dunya that denied all these kids the right to live. Because Allah never gave anyone a guarantee to live, right? To live 80, 90 years. It's all random. There's things you can do, of course, that Allah will prolong. But at the end of the day, it's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's all in the hands of Allah how much we live. You want to see the dunya? Go to the hospitals. Go to the graveyard. When someone dies, go and see how they wash him and put him in the kafan and they put him in the grave. This is the dunya, my friends. It's not what we see on TV and what we see on vacations and on what we see on these ads. This is all fake. It's all a game. It's all a deception. The dunya is all about sickness, disease, pain, betrayal. This is the dunya that sidelines good people and that brings evil people to the spotlight. The good people of this dunya are always sidelined. Look at the leaders of this dunya. They're the worst person usually. The worst individuals are always what? Are always rewarded by this dunya, right? Does this dunya always reward good people? No. Look at Imam Ali, what they did to him. Islam was built on Imam Ali. If it wasn't for his sword, there'd be no Islam. As soon as Rasulullah dies, he is sidelined. He has to sit in his house. And other people that did nothing for Islam, they came and they sat on the throne. If you trust the dunya, this is what we do to you. Imam Ali never trusted the dunya, as we see. He's cautioning us in so many parts of Nahj al-Balagha. Be careful, the dunya will deceive you. You'll put 50 years and then it'll give you nothing back. Because people betray you, even your own family may betray you. Someone told me during this pandemic that when this pandemic started, I was afraid. I was living somewhere and I had to leave and go. I just left and I went to spend, time with my family members, not his parents, but my extended family. So he says the borders were closed. Through a miracle, I left. I got a flight. When I arrived to the town of my family members, I didn't tell anyone because it just happened last second. I was in the taxi going to my family member's house. I called them and I'm telling them the good, glad tidings, the news that I'm coming. All of a sudden, they were surprised because I was coming from a place where there was, it was a hotspot, COVID-19 hotspot. All of a sudden, they didn't seem so happy. Well, when are you coming? How long do you want to stay? Well, we have sick people in the house. And then they just outright told me that you're not welcome to come. He's like, Wallahi, I would have never, ever in my dreams imagined that my family members would shun me. He's like, I sat in a hotel and I was just left all alone. And my own family members betrayed me. Now, did his family members do haram? No, I don't care. Maybe they did the right thing. But I'm telling you, this is the dunya. That at times you cannot rely on your own family members. They will betray you. They'll sell you because of a sickness, because they don't want any harm because of a sickness. They'll say, we don't want you. Don't come to our house. This is the dunya that you want. The only person that will never ever betray you is Allah. If you have iman, Allah will never put you down and betray you. But people will betray you. So the Imam says, be careful. Don't fight for the dunya. Don't be so greedy for this dunya. This dunya is the worst place. It's the worst abode. It's the place that evil doers rule and good people, like Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, are killed, are sidelined, are oppressed, are placed in prisons. So this dunya was not built as a place for you to enjoy and have fun and be greedy for. At least if you want to be greedy, want something that's good. The dunya is not something that's good in the eyes of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. And that's why Imam Ali says, take my word for it, or else you'll learn this lesson the hard way. You will learn this lesson the hard way. If you rely on the dunya and you trust it and you enjoy it, you love it, it will deceive you one day and it will take you down. I remember last year I went to New Jersey and they told me there's a young man, he's in his 30s, pharmacist, beautiful life, just had 2 kids, just bought a house, beautiful career that I was just beginning. And I went and I visited him. All of a sudden, he's like, one day, I play basketball, I sleep, the next day I wake up with severe backache. I go to the doctor, nothing, take medication, nothing. After a couple of weeks, he realizes he has a very rare type of cancer. His entire life goes down the drain. He quits his job, and all he's focused on is chemotherapy. And I went and I visited him. I saw his picture, and I saw him. He had lost so much weight. He had lost his hair. He was so depressed. And that's it. His life was, completely destroyed because a rare type of cancer that was very difficult to treat. So I was saying, subhanAllah, this is the dunya. Did this young man ever think this was going to happen to him? No. Many of us think our future is promising. Inshallah it is, but no one has a guarantee. Just be aware that this dunya can take you down in a split second. A car accident. A car accident, it takes a couple of seconds, you're enjoying yourself, then you're dead. So don't rely on this dunya so much. Don't want it because it's not something to be loved. That's why Imam Ali alayhi salam, he says in the other hadith I mentioned, he says to me, This dunya is worthless. Imam Ali never fought for the dunya. Why? Because he tried to be a good, no, because he never loved it. He knew this was a worthless, terrible dunya. He says in one hadith that this dunya to me is like a stinking, rotten carcass. He calls it jifa. Jifa is something when it dies, a rotten carcass. Would anyone be greedy for stinking, rotten carcass? No one would go and fight over it. We fight over the dunya because we don't see the true nature of the dunya. The Imam says if you were to put my lens, which is the true lens, you're not fooled by the sugar coating, then you will see all this dunya as jifa, stinking, rotten carcass. In another hadith, he compares the dunya to the bones of a pig. Imagine a filthy bone of a pig that's left to rot in the hands of a leper. Leprosy is a type of disease, judam, and it's contagious. Imagine right now we say COVID-19. Someone has COVID-19, he's coughing and sneezing, and he has a rotten bone. Would you go fight over that bone? No way, you'd run away. Imam Ali says, this is how I see the dunya. I run away from the dunya because I saw the true nature of the dunya. In another hadith, he compares the dunya to the sneeze of a goat. Worthless. And in this hadith that you can see, the Imam says, Ya dunya, ilayki anni. Leave me alone, O dunya. It's as if he's speaking to the Abi ta'arrafti am ilayya tashawaqti. Don't mess with me. Are you trying to lure me and seduce me? You think I'm going to follow the dunya, the money and the kingdom? And no way, power. Hayhat means never. Ghurri ghayri, find someone else to fool. La hajata li fiki. I don't need you. I don't want you. قد طلقتك ثلاثا لا رجعة فيها. Allahu Akbar. He uses a metaphor. He says, I have divorced you 3 times. You know, when you divorce a lady 3 times, you can never go back to her, even if you wanted her. So the Imam says, I have completely forgotten you. Don't want you. Even if I wanted you, I can't have you. Because it's like I've divorced you 3 times. Why? And then the Imam says, فَعَيْشُكِ قَصِيرٌ. You're too short. This dunya is too short. It's not worth to fight over. وَخَطَرُكِ يَسِيرٌ. And what you have to offer from the desires isn't too much. It's not worth it. وَأَمَلُكِ حَقِيرٌ. And the promises that you give are not worth it. But unfortunately, we are intoxicated by this dunya. Someone that's intoxicated, you can't, talk sense into them, right? No matter how much you tell them, don't rely on the dunya, they don't care because they see money, they see power, they see desires, fun, and that has completely intoxicated their minds. So they can't think right, they can't focus right. Imam Ali, in one hadith, he does mention this example. This dunya intoxicates us, he says. And once we're intoxicated, that's it. We don't see the true nature of the dunya. When we realize the true nature of the dunya, this is when we are no longer greedy for the dunya. So this, my friends, is number 2. Number 1, we said, learn contentment by not looking at those that have more than you and look at those that have less. That will help you in getting rid of the greed. Number 2, understand the true nature of the dunya. You will not want it. Just read the stories of how individuals' lives were turned upside down in a matter of a day or 2. Just look at this pandemic, look at how fragile this world is. Just a normal, very, very, mild virus. It's not like a deadly virus. It's not a deadly virus like the bubonic, the bubonic plague where it killed everyone. No. They say the fatality rate is 1%, 0.5%. And if you're healthy, you're okay. But still, it completely, stopped this entire world. This world is so worthless. It's so fragile. Just live in it to pass Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's test. Do what you have to do. Enjoy the next life. The next life is the true abode, as the Quran says. Number 2. Number 3, we want more and more of the dunya. I have $10,000. I made 10. I want another 10. I made 20. Why do we keep on wanting more and more? Even though 10,000 is enough for me. But why do I keep wanting more and more? Remember I mentioned the example of Amazon last week? It never gives up. No one gives up. They always want more and more. 1 billion, 10 billion, 100 billion, 1 trillion. Why do we keep on wanting more? because usually we think more is better. We have to understand that more is not better. You have what you need, khalas, that's enough. Bringing more is not always good. In fact, it's maybe worse, and I'll get to that. So ask yourself, why am I greedy? Why do I keep on wanting more money, more purses, more phones, more this, more that? Because I think the more I have, the happier I am. That's not true for the following reasons. Number one, making more money doesn't necessarily make you happier. There's numerous surveys from universities in the US and Canada that I read that have proven this through trials and surveys, that more money doesn't make you happier. Now, like I said, there's a basic amount of money that you need to live, but beyond that, it won't make you happier. What's that magic number? And some of these surveys, they highlight this number. If you make anywhere from 60,000 to 75,000, this is all you need. Anything above that won't make you happier. It won't. Based on experience and trials and surveys and tests and studies, they notice you don't get happier. Only in the beginning you're happier, but after you get used to what you have, your level of happiness, if you make 200 grand, is exactly like the one that makes 70 grand. Why? Since when you make more, your desires also evolve. You want more, right? So right now, if I buy a Camry, I'm going to really enjoy it, right? But after a year, probably after 6 months, it's going to become boring. I'm going to want a BMW. After a year of BMW, I'm going to want a Porsche. After a year, until there's no sky. The nafs has no sky. So teach it to just be satisfied with whatever it has. And that's why, as you can see in this hadith, look at what the Prophet, this is the dua of Rasulullah. It's so surprising. The Prophet said this, Allahumma rzuq Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa man ahabba Muhammad wa ala Muhammad al-afafa wal-kafaf warzuq man abghadha Muhammad wa ala Muhammad al-mal. If I want to do a dua for you, Brother Ali, I'm going to say, Ya Allah, give Brother Ali money. Give him wealth. Rizq. You're going to consider this as a positive dua, a good dua, right? The Prophet says, no. The Prophet says, oh Allah, give Muhammad Ali Muhammad and the lovers of Muhammad Ali Muhammad like you, give them afaf and kafaf. Give them what's enough, what's sad, just the basic, so that they can live a decent life. And give the enemies of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad money. Make them rich. Don't make Muhammad al Muhammad and the lovers of Muhammad al Muhammad rich. Make my enemies rich. Does that make sense? If you see the dunya like everybody else, it's so beautiful and having more is good, then you won't understand this hadith. But if you see the dunya like Rasulullah and Imam Ali, where it's like a snake, then you don't want to have any of it, because more doesn't make life better. So remember the dua of Rasulullah. So this is point number one. So part of number three, more doesn't mean better, because number one, more money doesn't mean you're happier. And number two, more money, the more you have, the more distracted you will be from the next life. You see, the more you have in this world, you have a business, 50 stores, you have tens of millions, you have to run your business, the more you're going to be distracted from the next life. You think you're going to have time to sit and pray Salatul Layl? When you have to wake up at 6 a.m. and go to work, and you have to manage your business, and you have to manage, so many things in your life, the more commitments you have, worldly commitments you have in this life, the more you're going to be distracted from the next life. And that's why, let me share with you the story that Imam al-Baqir mentions. And Imam al-Baqir speaks about the story of Sa'ad. Sa'ad was a poor companion of Rasulullah. He used to sit every day with Rasulullah. When you're poor, you're bored. You're always hanging out with good people. Like, come to the masjid, you'll see whoever is retired, whoever is bankrupt. You don't see the multimillionaires here. They're in their companies running them, right? So he's bored, he has nothing. He's just hanging out with Rasulullah the whole day, Sa'ad. But he was very poor. So the hadith says Rasulullah was depressed, sad at Sa'ad's condition. So Jibreel came down by the order of Allah, and he told Prophet Muhammad, Ya Muhammad, Allah says that He noticed you're very sad and depressed at Sa'ad's condition, because Sa'ad was a believer and he's so poor he doesn't even have a house. So the Prophet said, yes, I wish I can help him. Jibreel told him, do you want him to become wealthy? The Prophet said, yes, of course. Jibreel took a magical 2 coins. They were the normal dirhams that they used to use, but they were from Jibreel. He told Prophet Muhammad, give these coins to Sa'ad and his life will change. Rasulullah went to Sa'ad. He's in the masjid praying the whole day, listening to entire lectures of Rasulullah. He has nothing better, nothing else to do. He told him, Sa'ad, come here. Do you know how to do business? He's like, no, I've never done business. I've never bought anything, probably just food. He's like, well, take these 2 dirhams from me and go and do business. Just go and try to buy something and sell it. Now, these are 2 miraculous dirhams. He took those 2 dirhams. The hadith says anything he would buy with them, so he bought something with it, let's say this bottle of water, he would sell it for double the price, just through a miraculous way. And then he would, make 100% profit, and then 100% becomes 200. So within a couple of days, he became filthy rich because of the 2 dirhams. So Rasulullah comes to the masjid, he looks for Sa'ad. Sa'ad's not there. He asks, where's Sa'ad? Oh, Sa'ad's doing a business transaction. Go call Sa'ad. Sa'ad, yes, Ya Rasulullah, what do you need? You didn't come for Salatul Dhuhr. Oh, I'm sorry, because I was writing a check, in our terms, to someone. I was trying to, I was trying to do, exactly, call a deal with some individual. Do you want me to leave? The deal will break, completely go. The Prophet says, no, go Sa'ad. A couple of days pass by. Sa'ad's never there. So Rasulullah, once again, he's depressed. And sad at Sa'ad, because Sa'ad is missing from all the lectures, all the hadiths, all the salah. He's just dunya. Jibreel comes to him. Ya Rasulullah, you're sad once again. Or is it better now that Sa'ad is rich, but he doesn't come to the masjid? Or was he better off before? So Jibreel told him, is Sa'ad better off now or before? He told him, no, before. Because before he had his akhirah, but he had no dunya. Now he has the dunya, but he's wasting his akhirah. This is what money does. The Prophet says it distracts you from your akhirah, from your next life, from building your next life. So the Jibreel says, take back those 2 magical dirhams. His business will fall apart. He'll go right back to where he was. Prophet calls Sa'ad the next day, bring me those 2 dirhams. He has 1,000,000 dirhams now, but those 2 dirhams are what's important. He took those 2 dirhams. Within a couple of days, instantly he went back to, just kept on losing until he was bankrupt. He went back to the masjid praying with Rasulullah the whole day. So maybe now we understand why Rasulullah says, give my enemies money. Because money will distract you from the next life. What's the worth of this dunya if you have money and you enjoy it, but you have no next life? Or your next life is so simple because you haven't done anything for your next life. Yes. Number 3, with more money, there are certain strings, as they say, attached to more money. When Allah gives you more money, with the money, certain bad vices will also penetrate you. Like what? Greed. The more money you have, the more greedy you will become. Subhanallah. Why did you want money? Because you were greedy. Now that you have the money, you're more greedy. With money comes stinginess. That was the last vice that we spoke about last year. And with money comes arrogance. Let's speak about each one of these. More money means you are greedier. And this is the hadith of Imam Zainul Abidin. You could see it. ما أعطي أحد من الدنيا جفنة إلا أعطي من الحرص مثليها. The Imam says, anytime you get a piece of the dunya, a slice of the dunya, with that slice of the dunya, you will get twice as much greed, not once. So if you get $1,000, with it you'll get $2,000 worth of greed. If that makes sense. So be careful. Don't ask for too much money, because the more money you have, the more dunya you have, the more greed. This is one of the laws of Allah. With dunya, when you possess dunya, greed comes with it automatically. So if you don't want dunya, if you don't want greed, you shouldn't ask for dunya, because this is a contradiction. You don't want greed, but you want dunya. Dunya is greed. And that's why I've read, um, there's a hadith that I think I mentioned it, where Imam al-Sadiq says this dunya is like salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you will get. So the more dunya you have, the more you will want. That's with greed. Number two, with stinginess. The more dunya you have, the more money you make, the more stingy you become. You become attached to it. If I have $10, I may not be so much attached to it. It's just a lousy $10. But if I have 10 million, I'm going to guard that with my life and my son's life and my wife's life and my mother-in-law's life, right? I'll ransom my entire family to guard the 10 million. The more you have, the more attached. Remember, stinginess is when you're attached to your money. You can't let go. That's why a stingy person doesn't give gifts, doesn't give anything, because he's attached to his money. And here there's a hadith. Let me mention it to you. It's similar to the hadith, the story of Sa'ad. There was another companion of Rasulullah by the name of Tha'laba. Tha'laba was poor. He came to Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, I'm poor. Ya Rasulullah, do dua for me so I become rich. He knows Rasulullah, if he asks Allah, Allah will not say no. So he keeps on begging and, telling Rasulullah, Ya Rasulullah, he keeps on insisting, ask Allah to make me rich. Rasulullah gives him a warning. He tells him, be careful what you wish for, because the little that you have and you're thankful is better than having a lot, but you're not thankful, right? If you have a lot, but you're not thankful to Allah, what's the point? He says, okay, if I become rich, Ya Rasulullah, I'll give so much sadaqah, I'll help the poor, I'll do this, I'll do that. That's what everyone claims, right? Rasulullah says, are you sure? Yes. Ya Allah, this is Rasulullah doing a dua, direct channel to Allah. Ya Allah, please make Tha'laba rich. All of a sudden, Tha'laba, he owned a couple of goats or sheep. All of a sudden, just like the story of Sa'ad, his business empire started to grow. He had 2, they became 10, they became 100, until they became so much, he couldn't live in Medina anymore because he needed a huge field just to put his sheep. He had thousands. And back then, remember, your wealth was gold and silver and how much cattle you had, right? Well, it's not like now stocks and cash and land. Land also, but mainly it was a lot, when you had a lot of like sheep or a lot of camels, that means you were rich. Tha'laba became a millionaire. Now, when you own sheep, you're going to have to pay zakat. For each 40 sheep you have, one of them you have to pay a sadaqah. Rasulullah, each year when it was tax day, zakat day, he would send tax collectors. They would go to people that own gold, silver, that have fruit, certain types of fruits and vegetables like dates and whatnot. And he would go to the farmers that had cattle. If they had 40, for each 40, you have to pay 1. Now, if you have 40, you have to pay 1. If you have 400, you have to pay 10. If you have 4,000, you have to pay 100. If you have 40,000, you have to pay how much? 1,000. Let's say Tha'laba had 40,000. All of a sudden, he sees the tax collector of Rasulullah come. Give me, he does the calculations. Give me 1,000 sheep as a zakat. Tha'laba was like, are you serious? 1,000? The greed. Remember, the more you have, the stingier. There's greed and the stinginess. He doesn't want to give it. You got 39,000 because of the dua of Rasulullah. But that's not how a greedy person thinks, unfortunately. So he's like, you know what? I'm not going to give because of his greed, of his stinginess, of the nafs. But it doesn't look good on me. What am I going to say? So he goes to the tax collector. He says, did Rasulullah tell you, or is this your own, decision? Of course, Rasulullah. This is zakat in the Quran. He then starts to deny zakat. Sometimes you do something bad and you admit you're doing a bad thing. You just say, I don't want to do it. Other times you don't do what you're supposed to do. And what do you say? To justify your action, you say it's not haram. Like, so I've seen this, some sisters, they don't wear hijab. Hijab is not wajib. This is a second level of sin. Not only are you not wearing hijab, but now you are defying Allah himself that said hijab is wajib in the Quran. You say, no, it's not. No, you don't have to do that. Just say, okay, hijab is wajib, I'm just not ready for it. Fine. Now, still a sin, of course, but it's a lesser sin than saying it's not wajib. So not only did he not give zakat, he said, who said zakat is even wajib in this way? This is a jizya, the tax that Muslims would take from non-Muslims. And he started to, his iman started to go away. He started to attack Rasulullah. Why is he doing? I'm his companion. Why is he taking this high tax from me? So the tax collector is like, fine, fine. He goes back to Rasulullah and he tells him what happened. Do you know that Allah, when this happened, the Prophet knew this was going to happen. That's why he told Tha'laba, beware. Of the little that you have, you're thankful is better than having a lot, but you're not thankful. You don't thank Allah, you don't want to give him the zakat. You know what Allah did? He revealed an entire verse in the Quran condemning Tha'laba. There's a verse, وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَالَ وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ عَاهَدَ اللَّهِ لَإِنْ آتَانَا مِنْ فَضْلِهِ لَنَصَّدَّقَنَّ وَلَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. And amongst them, meaning amongst the companions, are those that said, وَلَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ, the verse, that they promised Allah, if we become rich, we will give. فَلَمَّا أَتَاهُمْ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ, when Allah gave them, He made them rich, بَخِلُوا بِهِ. But بَخِلُوا means they were stingy. They said no. وَتَوَلَّوْا وَهُمْ مُعْرِضُونَ. And they said no. This verse was condemning who? Tha'laba. فأعقبهم نفاقا في قلوبهم إلى يوم يلقونه بما أخلفوا الله ما وعدوه وبما كانوا يكذبون ألم يعلموا أن الله يعلم سرهم ونجواهم وأن Allah then calls him a hypocrite. فأعقبهم نفاقا. He's a munafiq until the day of judgment. So was it worth it that you make these millions, but then Allah calls you a munafiq in the Quran? Was it worth it? It wasn't. So the second problem with this dunya is what? Having more of the dunya is it makes you stingy. And once you're stingy, sometimes you're going to be stingy with Allah, like khums and zakat. So be careful. The more you have, the more stingy you may be. And that's why there's also, I read in a study that researchers found out that poor people usually give more than rich people. Not quantity, but percentage-wise. And this was done in America. They noticed the poorest Americans, on average, they gave 3% of what they owned. So let's say if I own 20,000, I'll pay 3% of that, which is 600. While the wealthiest Americans, they only paid 1% of what they owned. Now that 1%, maybe it's $1 million, but percentage-wise, you're still not that generous because you only gave 1%. So the more money you make, the percentage becomes less and less. Why? Because your attachment to your money becomes more and more. And I personally have noticed that. And you can ask Sayyid Muhammad Baqir that with the Islamic, causes, when you want people to donate, don't think it's the rich people that are donating. There are exceptions. I don't want to generalize. But if you look at any community, how many wealthy and how many middle class, I don't want to say poor, but middle class, it's usually the middle class that are always supporting and giving. It's not the multimillionaires. And mashallah, we have so many multimillionaires, Shia multimillionaires throughout the world. It's not these individuals most of the times that are funding, the causes of Islam. There are exceptions, of course. I know many wealthy individuals that do fund at a great amount, but that's an exception. Mostly it's the middle class. Why? Because the richer you get, the more stingy you become. This is number 2. And number 3, arrogance. Allah mentions this in the Holy Quran. Where? In this verse. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَيَطْغَى. The human being becomes corrupt. Baghiya, dictator, corrupt. You become, you disregard everything. And all you care about is yourself. إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَيَطْغَى أَنْ رَآهُ اسْتَغْنَى. When you become ghani, self-sufficient with money and power, you become arrogant. You don't care about anyone else. And we see that, right? We see powerful individuals and rich people, usually they're arrogant. Now, some of them, of course, they try to become humble, but most of the times they are arrogant. Why? Because everyone needs them and they don't need everyone else. And there's also a story about this where during the time of Rasulullah, there was a man sitting in the masjid of Rasulullah. He was wealthy, wearing nice clothing. A poor man comes. He sits right next to him. What does the rich man do? His cloak, his garment, it was to the side. He took it and he dragged it towards himself, keeping himself together. Is that disrespectful? Not necessarily. The Prophet saw that. The Prophet was really bothered by that. He told him, why did you do that? The rich guy told him, I don't know. I just took my clothes, I put it on myself. It was, on the. He's like, were you afraid that this poor man's poverty would, basically was contagious and it would transfer to you? That's why you didn't want your clothes to touch him? It's like, no, that doesn't make sense. Were you afraid that your, wealth would transfer to him just because you touched? Like, it's like a virus, contagious virus when you touch? It's like, no. It's like, then why did you do that? He understood that Rasulullah was telling him this isn't arrogant. You want to keep yourself to yourself because he's a poor person. You don't want to be associated with the poor person. This is a sign of arrogance. And I think I mentioned the story when I spoke about arrogance. One of the signs of arrogance, remember we said, some acts, they show that you're arrogant. How do you know if you're arrogant? This Rasulullah considered as a form of arrogance. When you just don't want to associate, he didn't say anything. He just took his clothing and he brought it close. Sometimes when you sit in a chair, you're waiting in the doctor's office or in the airport, the person next to you does that. You sit next to them, they quickly take their things and they try to stay away from you. Sometimes that could be because of arrogance. So the rich man, he told him, there's a shaitan that told me to do that. So basically arrogance. So this is number 3. And number 4, so let's go back. We were speaking about how to get rid of greed. Number 1, we said, don't look at those that have more than you. Look at those that have less. Number 2, we said, understand the nature of the dunya. You know that this dunya is a terrible place. Number 3, more is not better. Why? We mentioned 3 reasons. Number 1, because more money doesn't make you happier. Number 2, because more money, more dunya distracts you from the akhirah. Number 3, with more money comes greed, stinginess, and arrogance. And number 4, this is what you see on the screen. Number 4, the more you have, the more difficult your trial will be on the day of judgment. Listen to this hadith from Amir al-Mu'mineen. I haven't written it, but let me read it. Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he was struck on the 19th of Ramadan, that night, before he was struck Fajr, he had iftar at one of his daughter's house, either Zainab or Kulthum. So Amir al-Mu'minin was very humble. He used to eat stale bread, remember? So his daughter, when she placed the iftar in front of him, she placed, the hadith says, bread, salt, and yogurt, and milk, I'm sorry. Can you imagine your iftar is just bread, salt, and milk? So the Imam, he sees 3 things. He's annoyed. He says, why did you put 3 types of food in front of me? You know your father only eats 1 type. He considers, you either eat bread with salt or eat it with milk. Don't eat them all together. It's like you're eating chicken and meat. So the Imam considers this as a very, very, lavish iftar. Because this is Imam Ali alayhi salam, of course. So she told him, this is it's very simple. He says, no, take the milk away. So his last iftar before he was struck, it was bread and salt. Can you imagine? Because the bread back then probably had no taste. So you have to put some salt on it so you can taste it at least. Not like today's bread where it's all sugar. So the Imam then gave her his reasoning. He told Zainab or Kulthum, he told her, إِنِّي سَمِعْتُ جَدَّكِ Rasulullah. I heard your grandfather Rasulullah say, مَنْ طَابَ مَطْعَمُهُ وَمَشْرَبُهُ كَثُرَ وُقُوفُهُ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ or طَالَ وُقُوفُهُ بَيْنَ يَدَيِ اللَّهِ. The Imam said, I heard Rasulullah say that whoever indulges in the dunya, he eats so many types of food and drinks, it's all halal, but one of the consequences of that is that on the day of judgment, your trial will be longer. Remember the Quran says the day of judgment is 50,000 years long? Why? Because Allah is going to ask you about everything. So the more you eat, the more Allah is going to ask you. If you have an answer, fine, you'll pass, but you have to answer. It's like an audit. You're going to have to be audited by Allah, everything you did. So the Imam told her that the Prophet said, the more you eat, the more Allah will ask you. I don't want to wait and be asked for years and years. I want to quickly go to Jannah, to paradise. So this is one of the consequences of indulging in the dunya. You think more is better? It's better now, but it's not better for tomorrow. You're going to regret it. And that's why I read this hadith of the Prophet. The Prophet says, "Ma ahadun yawm al-qiyamah ghaniyun wala faqir, illa yawaddu annahu lam yu'ta minha illa al-qut. Min ad-dunya illa al-qut." He says, everyone on the day of judgment, rich people and even poor people, will wish that in the dunya they only had the minimum to live. Because everything over the minimum, Allah is going to audit you and ask you about, and it's going to keep you for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years. Remember, there's 50,000 years. Allah has so much time. He's not in a rush. So you're going to be like, oh my God, I went to that vacation. I had so much food, so much entertainment. Allah is going to ask me, that's probably going to take about 13 years, just that 1 week trip to Hawaii. Was it worth it? Now, of course, there is shafa'ah, there's good deeds that you can do, but we're speaking just generally, the more you're indulged in this dunya, the longer your trial will be on the day of judgment. And that's why there's a hadith, Imam al-Sadiq says, that rich people, rich believers and poor believers, the poor believers on the day of judgment, it's not on the screen, they will enter Jannah 40 years before the rich believers. Their iman is the same, their a'mal are the same. The only difference between this group and that group, they were rich in the dunya, they were poor. The poor ones enter 40 years before. Why? The Imam gives the answer. He says, because Allah, what is He going to ask the poor people about? Why did you have that ceiling that's leaking? Allah is supposed to, tell him, I'll reward you for that. He's going to ask the rich guy, oh, you brought all this, an artist from Spain to do all this. Where did you get this from? How much did it cost? Was your money halal? What did you, Allah's going to ask you about what you did. It's like that's why they say here in the US, they only audit usually rich people. If someone makes 20 grand a year, usually they're not going to audit him. It's a waste of time. What is he going to do? He's probably not going to pay $20 of extra tax. It's not worth it. They go after the millionaires. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to go after, He's not going to go after, but He's going to try those that had more, because there's more to ask them about. And this is where the hadith or the story of Salman comes, where he said, Najal mukhifun. Remember? Najal mukhifun, those that have less, they will be rescued on the day of judgment. Because Allah, what is He going to ask them about? Let me go a little faster so that I end this, inshallah, today. So after all of these effects, ramifications, and consequences, does it make sense to be greedy for the dunya? No. You should run away from the dunya, as Imam Ali alayhi salam said. So that was number 3. More of dunya does not mean it's better. Number 4. How do I get rid of the greed? Remember paradise. This is a strategy used by the Imams. When you see yourself, you're in love with the dunya, you're so attracted to the dunya, remember that what Allah has saved for you in Jannah and paradise is much better than this. And that's why, let me read you a quick story. Once, it's narrated that Imam al-Kadhim was in prison by Harun. Harun wanted to lure Imam al-Kadhim. He thought that if I bring him women, he's going to give up. He's going to go after them, and then I'll say, oh, this is your Imam. So he brought the most beautiful lady he could find. She was the princess of that time. He gave her so much money. He told her, your job is just to go and learn, seduce Musa al-Kadhim. He's in prison. The Imam, she goes in prison, he's praying, doing dua. She comes and she tries to do so many things to, draw his attention. The Imam doesn't even look at her. She tries so much, at the end she knows, no way, I'm never going to be able to lure this guy. This guy is a completely different world. So then the Imam, after she finishes, she gives up, he tells her, sit down. You know why I'll never even be attracted to you? Because I have paradise waiting for me. You think I'm going to be attracted by the dunya? Whatever the dunya offers is nothing. And then the hadith says he showed her, a little miracle, he showed her a picture of a hur al-ain that is waiting for him in al-Jannah. The hadith says when she saw how beautiful the hur al-ain, she started to cry at how ugly she is compared to that hur al-ain. So it's like you have a supermodel that you're married to. You're not going to look at a normal girl, right? Because you're not attracted to her. It's not you're against her. It's not because you're prejudiced or discriminating. No, you're just not attracted. When you see the top notch, you're not going to be attracted. When we have so many pleasures in Jannah, paradise, why go after this dunya? It's nothing. And finally, the final point that helps us in getting rid of greed. According to the ahadith, look at the life of Rasulullah and the Imams. And Imam al-Baqir mentions this. He says, إِيَّاكَ أَن تُطْمِحْ بَصَرَكَ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ فَوْقَكَ. Never look at those that have more. But if you did, you open Facebook, oh, you saw that new dress. I'm going crazy. I want to have it. فإن دخلك من ذلك شيء فاذكر عيش رسول الله فإنما كان قوته الشعير وحلواه التمر وقوده السعف. If your nafs is killing you, dragging you to have more and more, remember one point. Remember Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. How did he live? The Imam, he mentions قوته الشعير. He used to eat the most basic of food. حلواه التمر. His sweet that he used to eat was just dates, nothing fancy. وَوَقُودُهُ السَّعَفِ. Even the wood that he used to use to light fire, it was the cheapest type. So basically, Rasulullah lived the most modest lifestyle. If you think your life is not on par with rich people, if you think you don't have enough, just know this point. Whatever your life circumstances are, you live a life that materialistically is better than Rasulullah's life. And he's the best creation of Allah. Shouldn't that mean you should be content with what you have? Whatever your circumstances are, I don't care if you're renting the worst apartment, your life is better than Imam Ali materialistically. And this is Amir al-Mu'min. Shouldn't that console you? Who am I that my dunya is better than Rasulullah and Imam Ali? They never complained. And I'm still complaining because I don't have a better car, I don't have a better. So use the example of Ahlul Bayt to be content. Because they were content with what they had, and they were God's best creation. I should learn from them to also be content. It's like they mentioned the mahar of Fatima al-Zahra was something very cheap. So if you think that your mahar was only 10,000, I wanted 20,000, know that Fatima, and she's much better than every woman. She's the mistress of the woman of the universe. Her mahar was so simple. So that tells you, what? Then, alhamdulillah, I have a lot. So look at the example of Ahlul Bayt. Ahlul Bayt were happy because they had Allah, Iman. They didn't care about the dunya. So I should also learn to do that. With this, I end the lecture regarding vice, the second vice or the first vice of this year, which was greed. Inshallah, next week we'll go over stinginess. I had thought we went over stinginess, but next week we'll speak about al-bukhl, stinginess. Inshallah. Thank you so much, brothers and sisters. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.